Good morning, boys and girls. Welcome to our second day of math. Today we're going to continue working with rounding. So we're going to develop rounding to the nearest 10. We are on page 9 of your student workbook. So if you haven't already turned there, I would like for you to turn to page 9 in your student workbook and work with me as we complete these worksheets today. So our directions say to read and try to solve the problem below. Allie records the time she spends doing homework. She rounds each time to the nearest 10 minutes. If Allie spends 37 minutes on her homework, how does she record this time? So think about this. What are some ways that we could round 37 to the nearest 10? What could we do? Okay, one way we could do it would be to make a number line. Okay. The other way is we could write down the number, underline the tens column that we know that we're going to be rounding to, and look next door. So let's try our number line first. And we're rounding 37. So if we look in the tens here, we know we have 3 tens. So 30 is our first number, okay? What comes after 30 when we're counting by tens? If we're counting by tens, we have 10, 20, 30, 40 comes next. So that would be the next 10. So 37 is going to lie somewhere between 30 and 40. So let's do our halfway point. The halfway point is 35. Remember, halfway is 5. Okay? So 35 is our halfway point. We're rounding the number 37. 37 would fall somewhere in here. If we put it on the number line, it comes after 35, but before 40. So if we're looking, is 37 closer to 30 or is it closer to 40? It's closer to 40, isn't it? Okay, so 37 rounded to the nearest 10 is 40. Okay? The other way that you could work on this and round is to write your number 37 down. We're rounding to the nearest 10. Okay, it says round to the nearest 10. So we're underlining the tens column because we have our ones column, tens column. Okay, so our tens column is underlined. We look next door to the right. We have a 7. Is 7 5 or higher or less than 5? It's higher than 5, isn't it? So we're going to add 1 to our tens column. It rounds up to 4, and everything behind it becomes a 0. So 37 rounded to the nearest 10 is 40. So either way, whatever way works best for you, would work to round our number today. All right, let's look on our next page. Turn to page 10. So here on this page, we're going to explore different ways to understand rounding to the nearest 10. It says Allie records the time she spends doing homework. She rounds each time to the nearest 10 minutes. If Allie spends 37 minutes on her homework, how does she record this time? So, if we look here, we can use our hundreds chart to help round to the nearest 10. So if I'm looking, I'm seeing that 37 falls right here, okay? So here's our 37, okay? It falls between 30, if we're counting on our hundreds chart, we go 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40. So it falls between 30 and 40, doesn't it? Okay? So we know that 37 is higher than 35. So 37 rounds up to 40. Allie records the time as 40 minutes. So this was another way that you could use another strategy to solve your problem, to use a hundreds chart and look where it's pictured between what two tens. So we noticed here that it was between the 30 and the 40. Okay? Alrighty, let's look at page 11 here. Now you will use the problem from the previous page to help you understand how to solve a new problem involving rounding to the nearest 10. So now we're going to round 943 to the nearest 10. Let's underline that. Let's circle 943. That's our number we're rounding, and we're rounding to the nearest 10. Okay? So that helps us draw our attention to what we need to be doing. So, we're rounding to the nearest 10. So what number's in the 10 spot? Well, let's look. We have ones, tens, hundreds. What number was in the 10 spot? We had a 4 in the 10 spot, didn't we? Okay? So, I know, because I have 4 tens there, it's somewhere between 40 and what's the next 10? Well, let's count. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. 50 comes next. So it's between 40 and 50. Okay? What number is halfway between those two tens? What's our halfway point? Remember? The 5. So 45 would be halfway between 40 and 50. Is 943 less than or greater than the halfway point? So 43, is that less or half, or is it less than or greater than the halfway number, 45? 43 comes before it, so it's less than. So we're going to write less than in our blank. Okay, I'll give you a minute to write those down. So, when we look at our number, 943, do we round up to 950 or do we round down to 940? If it's less than 45, we're going to round down. What is 943 rounded to the nearest 10? If we round that to the nearest 10, we know that it's less than 45, so we got to round down to 40. So it's 940. So explain how to round a number to the nearest 10. What could we do? I want you to think about that on your own for a moment. How could we round to the nearest 10? There's several different ways you can talk about this. Okay? If you're finding that you look at the halfway number between the tens, and then you look to see if the number is more than or less than that halfway number, that is one way you could tell if it's going to round up to the next 10 or down. Or we can always underline our place value that we're going to be underlining, like or rounding, which would be our tens column, and we look to the right. If it's 5 or higher, we round up. If it's less than 5, we round down, don't we? Okay? So, we need to look at what two tens the number falls between. Mark your halfway point, then see if your number is less than or greater than the halfway point. Alright, so that's a lot to write there, so I'm going to let you guys take a moment and write that all down. Make sure that you get everything down. You can press pause so that you guys can write everything that you need to for that question. Alright, push pause now. Alright, once you're done with number 6 here, number 7 is a reflect question. This is something that you'll have to do on your own. So on number 7 it says look back at your try it strategies by classmates and picture it and solve it. Which models or strategies do you like best for rounding to the nearest 10? Explain. So we've modeled a couple different strategies. Do you like drawing your number line and looking to see where your number falls on the number line? Is it closer to the 40? Is it closer to the 50? If we're rounding between those two numbers, for example, like on this page, 943. Or do you like looking at the hundreds chart like we did here? Remember the hundreds chart? And you could locate your two tens that it falls between? Or do you like where we wrote the number like this and we're rounding to the nearest 10, so we underline the tens column, we look next door, and we ask ourselves, is it 5 or higher or less than 5? Well, I have a 3 here. 3 is less than 5, so that 4 is going to stay the same, and everything behind it becomes a 0. So there's 3 different ways that we've discussed here. So I want you to write down which way that you liked to solve this problem the best. Go ahead and do that now. You can press pause. Alright, number 8. We're on page 12 here. Number 8, it says, what is 106 rounded to the nearest 10? Show your work. Okay, so 106 rounded to the nearest 10. Well, we can write 106. Okay, we need to underline our tens column because we're rounding to the nearest 10. So I'm looking, I have ones, tens. Okay, so my zeros in the tens column, I'm going to underline it. And I look next door here. I have a 6. Is 6 5 or higher? Or is it less than 5? Yeah, a 6 is higher than 5. So we're going to add 1 to our tens column. And everything behind it becomes a 0. Okay, don't forget to put your 100 spot there because that doesn't change. It stays there the whole time. So 106 rounded to the nearest 10 is 110. Right, good job. So our solution there is 110. All right, number 9, round to the nearest 10. What is a number less than 180 that rounds to 180? A number that is less than 180, so it has to be below 180, but it rounds to 180. Show your work. So I'm thinking I need to find a number between two tens. So we know 180 is on this side. What's the 10 that comes before 180? Yeah, it'd be 170. So let's mark our halfway point, 175. So we know that anything on this side, from here to here, is going to round up to 180. So what would our numbers be there? There's several different answers you could have. We know that 175 would round up to 180. What comes after 175? 176. After 176, what comes next? 177. What comes after that? 178. And after 178 comes 179. So any of those numbers right there would have worked, because these numbers, they're less than 180, but they would all round up to 180 if we're rounding to the nearest 10. Okay? And you can double check your work by looking and saying, okay, let's underline our tens column. Look next door, I have a 5. Is it 5 or higher? Yes. So we would round up. The 7 would become an 8, and everything behind it becomes a 0. So we would have 180. You could do that with each one of these, and you would see that all of these round to the nearest 10 of 180. Okay? So now on part B, it says, what is a number greater than 180 that rounds to 180? So now we're working with 180, and what's the next 10? 190. So here's our halfway point, 185. So we know anything from 185 to 190 would round up to 190, okay? So anything below 185 would round down to 180. So what's less than 185? What's one less? 184. What's one less than that? 183. One less than that? 182. One less than that? 181. So all of those would round down to 180. So any of those would have worked there. Okay? Alrighty. Number 10. Which numbers round to 640 when rounded to the nearest 10? So we got to look at all these numbers, and we got to decide, does it round to the 640 when it's rounded to the nearest 10? Well, let's look. Part A, 644. We got to underline our tens column. We look next door, we have a 4. Is it 5 or higher or less than 5? Your 4 is less than 5, so this 4 would stay the same, and everything behind it becomes a 0. So letter A would work. That rounds down to 640. Let's look at letter B. 634. Find our tens column. We have 1s, 10s, so our 3's in the tens column. We look next door, we have a 4. Is it 5 or higher or less than 5? A 4 is less than 5, so our 3 will stay the same, and everything behind it becomes a 0. So did this round to 640? No, it did not. So we're going to keep this one like it is. We're not going to fill in the circle or the little bubble for letter B. Let's look at letter C here. 645. We got to find our tens column. So we have 1s, 10s. So 4 is in the tens column. Underline it. Let's look next door. We have a 5. Is 5 or higher? Or is it less than 5? It's a 5 or higher, so that 4 becomes a 5. We round up when it's 5 or higher, and everything behind it becomes a 0. So that's 650. Did that round to 640? No, it didn't. So we're going to leave our bubble blank there. 635. Underline our tens column. We have 1s, 10s, 100s. Our 3 was in the tens column. Look next door, we have a 5. Is it 5 or higher? Yes. So we're going to round that 3 up to the next 10. It becomes a 4, and everything behind it becomes a 0. Did this one round to 640? Yes. So we're going to fill in the bubble there. The next one, letter E, is 600. We find our tens column. 1s, 10s, 100s. The 0's in the tens column. We look next door, we have another 0. Is it 5 or higher or less than 5? It's less than 5, so that 0 will stay the same and everything else becomes a 0. So we remain at 600 there. Letter F, 649. Find our tens column. Ones, tens, hundreds. What was in the tens column? The 4. So we look next door to our ones column. We have a 9. Is it 5 or higher or less than 5? It's a 5 or higher. So our 4 becomes a 5 because we round up when it's 5 or higher, and everything behind it becomes a 0. So that rounds to 650. So that one would not work. So we only had 2 there that worked. We had letter A and letter D. Notice I didn't just go and fill in bubbles. I had to work out each one of those problems and round each one of them to see if they rounded to 640. Alrighty. So, let's see here. You guys have done a great job with that so far. Let's look at page 13 here. Alright, so we're going to continue practicing rounding to the nearest 10. Okay? So, alright, number 1 says, we need to look at this example. It says, Robert always tells his friend how many points he earns on his video game. He rounds the number to the nearest 10. On Saturday, Robert earned 63 points. So I'm going to underline that. And I'm going to underline that he always rounds to the nearest 10. Okay? It's always important to underline that key information in your story problems. Okay? The question says, how many points did he tell his friend he earned? So I'm looking for this question right here. How many points did he tell his friends that he earned if he's rounding it to the nearest 10? So we look here, 63. Okay? 63 falls between 60 and 70. So is it closer to 60 or is it closer to 70? Okay? So because 63 is closer to 60, Robert tells his friends that he earned 60 points. Okay, so 63 rounded to the nearest 10 is 60. Okay, so did I have to write that there? No, not necessarily, but it helps me to kind of focus my attention on what I need to solve the rest of the problems on this page. Alright, so number 1 says, later that afternoon, Robert spent more time playing the video game. He earned 88 points. How many points did he tell his friend that he earned? Well, we got to round to the nearest 10 because it said he always rounds to the nearest 10, right? So let's look at 88. Find your tens column. We have ones, tens. So I have an 8 in the tens column and 8 in the ones column. We look next door. Is the 8 5 or higher or less than 5? It's higher than 5, isn't it? So we round up. The 8 becomes a 9 and everything behind it becomes a 0. So he earned 90 points that round. Number 2, the number 157 is between which 2 tens? Circle the 2 tens. Well, let's look. We got to find our 10 here. Ones, tens. The 5 is in the tens column, so I know it's going to lie between 50 and what's the next 10? 160. Okay? So it lies right here between 150 and 160. If I marked it on here, it would lie somewhere right in there, 157. Okay, so what is 157 rounded to the nearest 10? Well, we marked it on there. Is it closer to 150 or 160? It's closer to 160. Okay, if the number line's hard for you, you can always write it out, just like I always do. You can do ones, tens, underline your tens column. Look next door, we have a 7. Is it 5 or higher or less than 5? Your 7 is higher than 5, right? So we're going to add 1 to your tens column, and everything behind it becomes a 0. 160. I got the same answer. Alrighty, let's look at the next page. To earn money, you brush dogs. You are so busy that you hire your friends to help. You pay your friends $1 for each dog that they brush. You only have 10 bills to pay with them, or to pay them with. You must round each payment to the nearest 10. Complete the table to show how much each friend gets paid. So, Jessica, if we look here, she brushed 12 dogs. So we need to round her payment to the nearest 10. So let's look. We have ones, tens, or ones in the tens column. Next door we have a 2. Is it 5 or higher or less than 5? It's less than 5. So our 1 will stay the same and everything behind it becomes a 0. So Jessica was paid $10. Let's look at Sophie. She brushed 18 dogs. So we have ones, tens, underline our tens column. Look next door, we have an 8. Is the 8 5 or higher or less than 5? It's higher, isn't it? So my 1 we're going to add 1 to the tens column. It becomes a 2. And everything behind it becomes a 0. So 18 is rounded to 20. The next one, Mia, she brushed 22 dogs. So we're going to find our tens column. We have ones, tens, underline your tens column. Look next door, we have a 2. Is it 5 or higher or less than 5? Yeah, 2 is less than 5, so our 2 will stay the same, and everything behind it becomes a 0. So Mia earned $20 as well. Number 5, part A. The number 767 is between which two tens? Well, let's look. Let's find our tens column. Ones, tens. I have a 6 in the tens column. So it's between 760. What comes next? What's the next 10? So if we go 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 comes next. So 770 would be next. Don't forget to put your hundreds place in front of it, because that 7 in the hundreds place doesn't disappear. Alright, so what number is halfway between these two tens, 760 and 770? Remember, what's our halfway point? The 5, so 765. Alright, is 767 less than or greater than the halfway point? 767, 765, is it less than or greater than? Yeah, 767 is greater than that halfway point. So will it round up or down? If 767 is greater than 765, is it going to round up to 770 or is it going to round down to 760? It's going to round up. It's past that halfway point, so it's closer to the next 10. So we round up to 770. So what is 767 rounded to the nearest 10? We just said it. 770. Okay. Let's look at number 6. The number 342 is between which two tens? Well, let's find our 10. We have ones, tens. Oh, our 4's in the tens column. So we have 340. What comes after 40? When we're counting by tens? 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 is next. Don't forget to put your 3 in front of it. So 350. So will 342 round up or down? Is it closer to 340 or is it closer to 350? If you said it's closer to 340, you are correct. Good job. What is 342 rounded to the nearest 10? Oops, sorry, I should have said it'll round down there. I got ahead of myself, didn't I? So what is 342 rounded to the nearest 10? 340. Mrs. Clark was going ahead. She was speeding right through, wasn't she? All right, so number 7. What is a number less than 930 that rounds to 930? So something that's less than 930. So 930 would be here, and I need my 10 that comes before that. That would be 920, right? Because 20 comes before 30. So we need to mark our halfway point, 925. Sorry, that's a 2 there, 925. So we need a number that's less than 930, but it's going to round up to it. What can we pick there? We could pick anything from 925 up to it. So we could have 925, 926, 927, 928, or 929 as our answer there. Okay? Any of those would round up to 930. And they're all less than 930. Okay? They're all smaller. Okay, what is a number greater than 930 that rounds to 930? So now we need 930, because that's our smallest number, right? It has to be greater than that, so draw your number line. The next 10 is 40. You have 10, 20, 30, 40. Don't forget your 100 spot. So 940 here, okay? So we want a number that is going to be greater than 930 but rounds to 930. What would be your halfway point between 930 and 940? It would be 935, right? So we need something that falls in between here. So we could have 931, 932, 933, or 934. All of those are greater than 930, but they would round to 930. Okay? All right, great job today, guys. Make sure that you complete your assignment that is posted on the website for this today. If you have any questions, please feel free to call me or send me a message. Thanks. Bye-bye.